Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to teach you how to play Tug. Tug is a tug of war card game for exactly 2 players, and we're going to jump right into it. And let me pause the game after this part. Perfect. Okay. So in a game of Tug, both of the players have a team of dogs, and they're trying to use their team of dogs to pull this pawn all the way to their side. It's a tug of war. So when I say all the way to this side, there's a pawn that starts in the center. And if I pull it all the way into my video box, which is to say if I pull it to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces, then I win. And if the other player, whose team red, manages to pull it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces into their video box, then they win. So that's the tug of war, and during the course of the game, the pawn will be moving left and right. I start with 5 dogs. And you can see these dogs in my hand over here, and if you hover over them, you'll see the image a little bit bigger. Every dog has a number on it. That number represents the dog's strength, right? It's the value on the card. So I start with 5 dogs of value 1, and so does my opponent. There are 10 dogs with a value of 1 in the deck, which is what, and those five start with me, 5 start with Team Red. There are 5 dogs with a value of 2. Here's one of them, for example. And there's 1 dog with a value of 3. And there's 2 bones with a value of 0, which I will explain a bit later. On your turn, you are going to allocate some of your dogs to pull the pawn. And your remaining dogs will be used to bid on the next card in the deck. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to simultaneously pull the pawn towards you, because you win if you get the pawn in your video box. But also you want to upgrade your cards over time by bidding and winning future cards in the deck so that you can get some dogs of a higher strength into your hand, which will allow you to pull the pawn with more force later in the game. Okay? So when I say that I'm allocating some of my dogs to pull the pawn towards me, what I will do is on my turn I will choose some of my dogs, and I'm saying these dogs are the ones who are doing the tug action. They are pulling the pawn. My opponent is doing the same thing. And what happens is, once we've both decided which dogs we will tug with, those dogs are revealed, and we see which group of dogs has the higher strength, the higher combined point value. So let's imagine that I use 1, 2, 3 dogs with a combined value of 3 to pull the pawn, but my opponent uses 4 dogs with a combined value of 4 to pull the pawn. What will happen is the difference in those values is 1, and it's in the direction of my opponent. So the pawn will move 1 space towards my opponent. Right? If we have the same value, the pawn stays exactly where it is. If one of us has a higher value, the pawn moves in that direction, and the number of spaces it moves is equal to the difference in the tug value between the 2 sets of dogs that were played. Straightforward enough. Now, the dogs that I didn't play are the dogs that I will be using to bid on the next card. Same for my opponent. Whichever one of us has the higher bid value, so the bid value is the combined value of all the dogs that were used to bid, whichever player has the higher bid value will win the next card in the deck, and that card will go into their hand. Now, what is the next card in the deck? The next 3 cards in the deck are shown for you always in the top right corner, the bottom left corner, and the bottom right corner. So this is the card that we are currently bidding on, and once someone wins that card, this card will move up here, and this card will move to the left here. It'll shift, and the next card will be shown in that 3rd spot. Okay? And we are playing till the deck runs out. So hopefully someone wins by the time the deck runs out. There's 3 cards here, right? And there's 5 cards in the deck. So the game ends after 8 rounds. After 8 rounds, either the pawn ends up in someone's box, in which case they win, or there's a couple of other win conditions, which we'll talk about. Let's play through 1 round and see if we can just make some of these rules clear, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the bones and the bidding. So I will pull the pawn with 3 of my dogs for a combined value of 3. So I'm going to select this person and this person and this person and confirm. That's my opponent. They had a tug value of 2. And that's me. I have a tug value of 3, so the pawn moves 1 space towards me. There you go. However, my opponent has a bid value of 3 I have a bid value of 2. So they win the bid, right? And the card that they won is that bone in the top right. So now they take the bone into their hand. Now they have 6 cards because you get your 5 dogs back. They get their 5 dogs back. Out of their 6 cards, they have to discard 1 so that they're back to 5 cards. Okay, and they did that. And now we're on to the next round. So that is a full round of tug, and there's only 8 rounds. Tug and bid, the pawn moves, someone wins the bid for the next card, that card goes into their hand, and then they discard 1. Simple. Now, what happens in the case of a tied bid? Let's imagine that my bid value is 3 and their bid value is also 3. What will happen is the player who wins the bid is the player who is currently losing the battle for the pawn. So let's imagine this is the state of the game and we both tie in the bid. Team Red, who's my opponent, would still win the bid because the pawn is closer to me than it is to them. So they're losing the battle for the pawn, so they win the bid. If the pawn is exactly in the center and both of us tie in our bid value, then the card that we are bidding on gets discarded. There is no winner of the bid. No one wins the bid. Okay, so all of that's pretty straightforward. Let's talk about these bones. Bones have a value of 0. So whether you play a bone to tug or to bid, it has a value of 0, which is bad. However, if you end up with both bones in your hand, you win the game immediately. There are only 2 bones in the entire deck. And if both of them end up with you at the same time, so you can't discard any of the bones before that, right? You have to win the bone in a bid, you have to hold on to it, then you have to win the second bone in a bid, and at that point you immediately win the game. So that's another way to win besides pulling the pawn all the way into your video box. Final thing. What happens if the deck runs out of cards? So we've gone through all 8 cards in the deck and nobody has won. Nobody has managed to pull the pawn all the way into their box. No one has 2 bones. In that case, the winner of the game is the person who did not win the bid for the 3 card. Okay, there's only 1 3 card in the whole deck. If you were the player who did not win the bid for that card, and it's the end of the game and no one has won, you win. The rationale being, if another way to think of it is, if you win the bid for the 3 card and now you have this 3 dog, which is the most powerful dog, you'd better win in some regular way. Otherwise, essentially you got a huge advantage and squandered it, so the other player wins. If no one won the bid for the 3 dog, which can only happen in one way, we had the same bid value and the pawn was in the center at that time, meaning the 3 card got discarded and there was no bid winner. If that happened and we make it to the end of the game and no one has won, then it's a tie. So that is the only way it can be a tie. Let's play through a few more rounds so you can see how this works, and then we'll wrap up. So this next dog that we're bidding for is a 2. I would very much like to win that 2, so I will allocate more of my dogs towards bidding. So I will only tug with 1 dog. Oh, but so did my opponent. And in fact, but my opponent has a bone. So I will win the bid because the bone is worth 0. So they have a bid value of 3, but I will have a bid value of 4. And I will win the bid for this card. Perfect. Now I get the card in my hand. Now I have to discard 1. So I just won this card. All my other dogs are worth 1, so I will discard this person. Perfect. Right, now we're bidding for the 3. I really want the 3. So again, I will allocate more of my dogs towards the bid. Oh, somehow I still won that, so okay. Pawn moves 1 towards me because again the difference in these values is 1, so the pawn moved 1 towards me. And again I have the higher bid value because I have this 2 now, right? So this is the value of accumulating dogs with a higher value, right? Because over time you can just do both things, whether it's tugging or bidding, with a higher value, right? And so you can consistently start winning. So what I'm going to do is I have Really high value. Let me discard this one first. And I'm going to just try and win the game outright for you. So I will tug with all my dogs. And let's see what happens. Okay, I tug. So they have a tug value of 3 when you add these all up. However, I have a tug value of 8. So I managed to pull the pawn into my video box and I win. Okay. So that is how you play a game of tug. Really fun game. Takes about 10 minutes. Little bit strategic, little bit tactical. You're trying to predict what your opponent will do and how many dogs they'll allocate towards both actions. Really fun, very addictive. I would highly, highly recommend it. And I hope you have fun. All right, thanks so much. Bye.